Have you ever felt like you need a secret decoder ring to understand some of these big reports? Like you just want to get to the heart of it without wading through pages and pages.
Well, that's exactly what we're all about on the deep dive. You sent us this comprehensive report, and our task is to break it down, extract the key knowledge, the interesting insights, make it clear, and hopefully even a little surprising.
And the document you provided is an interesting one. It is the Relatorio Quadriennio, that's 2021 to 2024, for those keeping track at home from PIPGLA.
Right. So that's, for those maybe not as familiar, that's the self-assessment report from the postgraduate program in Applied Linguistics at the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro, UFRJ.
A very important program.
Yeah, UFRJ, major university.
Yes.
And PIPGLA is kind of a powerhouse in the field of applied linguistics, not just in Brazil, but also across Latin America.
Yeah, really a center for understanding how language works in the real world. So, I guess the task you've set for us is to dive into this report and see what PPGLA has been up to for the past 4 years, what impact they're having, and where they're going next.
Right. It's a peek behind the curtain of a very influential program.
So to give you a little roadmap, the report covers everything. The program's core ideas, teaching, societal impact, a bit of history, who gets admitted, and even how they dealt with COVID.
Okay. Sounds good.
Let's jump in. What would you say is the fundamental driving force behind PPGLA? Like their core mission, vision, what are they all about?
Well, what's really insightful here is this central belief that they have, which is that language isn't just transmitting information, but it's a fundamental social practice woven into society and culture.
Okay.
So the research on how language is used in various situations is really an exploration of social dynamics.
Right, so not just grammar textbooks.
Exactly.
The key here is understanding language as a force shaping our interactions and understanding of the world, I guess.
Yeah.
They also have some guiding principles for the kind of professionals they want to produce.
Right.
Like ethical, proactive individuals.
Exactly. They aim to produce individuals who are not only knowledgeable, but also responsible and ready to take initiative. And importantly, these graduates are highly employable, particularly in the education system,
Okay.
from elementary schools to universities. They're really focused on preparing people to make a difference in teaching and learning.
And it seems like they're doing that pretty well. The report lists a huge range of places where their graduates work, from respected technical schools and the renowned Colégio Pedro II to major universities across Brazil, UFRJ itself, and even URJ, UFF, and many others.
It's quite a reach, and it highlights how they emphasize their ability to adapt to the evolving needs of the field. In a dynamic area like applied linguistics, that's so important to stay relevant.
Definitely. So we know the why and the who they are aiming for. Let's get into what their research.
Okay.
The report breaks this down into 3 main lines.
Okay.
Can you outline those for us?
The first line is discourse and literacies. And the key here is they're looking at how we create meaning in all sorts of social spaces, really going beyond just educational settings.
How interesting.
So they see literacy as not just reading and writing, but a broader set of practices for making sense of the world.
So not just textbooks, but how we use and understand different forms of communication, from online forums to, workplace discussions, all sorts of situations.
Exactly.
Okay, so the second one.
The second is discourse and social practices, and this takes a more critical approach.
Okay.
It's a deep investigation of how language works in diverse contexts, looking at power and ideology.
Okay.
They're especially interested in what they call linguistic ideologies, the beliefs we have about language and how these connect to broader social issues and inequalities.
So essentially how language can uphold or challenge existing power structures, right?
Precisely.
Okay. And the third one.
The third line is discourse and transculturality, which expands the focus to language across borders.
Okay, so in what way?
Well, the core idea here is to see how communication happens when you cross cultural, historical, even geopolitical borders. So they look at the interplay of language, culture, identity, and translation.
Right, so how meanings are transformed and negotiated in different contexts.
Precisely.
So these 3 lines together, they kind of provide a pretty comprehensive view of language in action.
Yeah.
From everyday interactions to global exchanges.
They really do cover a lot of ground.
The report mentions they actually reconfigured these lines. What was the thinking behind that?
The reconfiguration was about achieving greater coherence. They wanted to align the research lines with the strengths and interests of their faculty, so there are more natural connections between projects.
Makes sense. Ensuring that the program's structure reflects the expertise and passions of the researchers. Now, PIPGLA isn't just individual researchers, right? They have these nucleos, or research clusters, if you will. What are those all about?
Think of these clusters as smaller, more focused research groups within PIPGLA, each led by faculty members. They really dig deep into that connection between interaction and discourse, but in specific social and cultural contexts that align with the three research lines. It's where they really get into the details.
So if I understand right, these clusters are where the really in-depth specific research happens.
Right.
And the report gives some really interesting examples of current projects, these nuggets of inquiry, as you call them.
Yeah, some really cool stuff.
Can you highlight a few that stand out to you?
Sure. One that caught my eye is Professor Adolfo Tanzi Neto's project, Agency in the Multimediatic Productions of Young Brazilians in Super Diverse Spaces. This is about how young people in these diverse environments use digital media to express themselves and navigate their social lives. Very relevant today.
Oh yeah, super relevant to our increasingly digital world.
Absolutely.
What's another one?
Professor Luis Paula de Moita Lopes, a big name in the field, is leading a project on digital literacies, performativity in a world of linguistic, textual, and human flows, which explores how our identities are shaped and performed through language in this constant stream of online information and interaction.
Right, so how we present ourselves online.
Yeah.
Very timely.
Mm-hmm.
There was another one about emotions online. That sounded interesting.
Yes, that's Professor Branca Falabella's work, Brutalities and Excitabilities in the Semiotic Discursive Construction of Effects on the Web. It's about how emotions, both positive and negative, are constructed and spread online through language. Really important to understand.
Oh, definitely. Could shed some light on some of the stuff we see online. What about some of the other clusters? There was one looking at cities, wasn't there?
Professor Luciana Nascimento's project, Urban Cartographies, the Belle Epoque and its reverses, centers, and margins, is looking at how language and discourse shaped urban development and inequalities during a specific historical period. Really interesting historical and spatial approach.
And I think there was one on translation, too.
Right. Professor Janine Pimentel is leading research on specialized translation in Brazil since the turn of the century. Meta-discourse, market, and research, which delves into the trends and challenges translators face in conveying specialized knowledge.
Interesting. Very niche but important work.
Definitely. And if we go back to more fundamental concepts, Professor Henrique Karras is exploring the history of the concept of nature, how our understanding of it has been shaped through language over time.
Fascinating.
And Professor Tatiana Ribeiro's project examines Herodotus's writings about Egypt to see how he used language to create ideas about what was other or different.
I love how applied linguistics can tackle such diverse topics.
It's quite impressive.
But it's not just about the research itself, right? It's also about sharing that knowledge and connecting with the world beyond the university. How does PIPGLA engage with that broader community?
This is a really important aspect of their work. They are committed to disseminating their findings beyond academia. One great example is their blog, KaiNTXT, which they specifically highlight as a key platform for making their research accessible to a non-academic audience.
That's fantastic. Bridging that gap between research and the public is so important. And there are other research clusters with specific outreach efforts too, right?
Yes, several. You have NUDES, which oversees KonTXT, and then LEED, which focuses on language and history.
Okay.
PEC-RJ, with its focus on classical studies and the ProEra project. NUPEL, which explores language teaching, learner autonomy, and technology in education. NELID, which takes a critical look at textbooks and learning materials through a literacy lens. Each of these clusters is really tuned into social concerns.
It seems like each cluster has its own way of connecting and sharing its work.
Exactly. You also have SILIC, an interdisciplinary group, PLLL, which focuses on literacy practices and teaching.
Okay.
And ICI, the Nucleus on Interaction in Institutional Contexts, which works directly with the Court of Justice of Rio de Janeiro.
Oh, wow. That's a tangible example of applying linguistics to make a real difference. And the report also mentions that all of these research clusters use a really wide range of theoretical and methodological approaches, right?
Yes, it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. It reflects the diverse expertise and intellectual curiosity within PIPGLA.
For sure. Now let's talk about how PIPGLA fosters connections both within its own program and internationally. How do they encourage collaboration, and what kind of global links do they have?
Collaboration is a big focus. One example is their Introduction to Applied Linguistics course, which is co-taught by faculty from all three lines.
Oh, interesting.
It exposes students to diverse perspectives from the get-go, encouraging them to think across disciplines.
That's a good way to break down those silos, for
Yeah.
sure. And they also mention joint publications and events.
Right, those are key for fostering dialogue and the exchange of ideas. They even highlight specific interdisciplinary publications,
Oh, nice.
like one on the terminology of clothing, which bridges linguistics and other fields, and another upcoming book on urban memories and languages.
Cool. So bringing together different fields.
hmm They also emphasize their growing strength as a center for postdoctoral studies, attracting researchers who want to collaborate and contribute to the environment.
That's great to see. Let's shift gears a little and talk about the curriculum. How is it structured to reflect their focus on interaction and discourse?
Well, the curriculum is intentionally designed around that central idea.
Okay.
That mandatory introduction to applied linguistics course for master's students is key. It introduces them to the core theoretical and methodological questions. And as we mentioned, it's co-taught by faculty from all three lines.
Right. So really emphasizes that interdisciplinary foundation.
Yeah.
What about the elective courses? What kind of options do students have?
The elective courses are super diverse, offered at both the master's and doctoral levels. They allow students to delve deeper into specific areas within each research line. Master's students have to take electives in their own line, but can also choose from the other two lines or even other programs. Doctoral students have a similar setup, building on their previous knowledge.
So lots of flexibility to really tailor their studies to their interests.
Exactly. The report even gives some examples, like courses on teaching materials, digital languages, and discourse in media.
Sounds like a good mix.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what about the practical aspects? What resources do they have to support all this work?
They have dedicated computer labs and language labs, essential for this type of research. They also have CIML, their Center for Multimedia Studies in Language and Literature, which likely provides specific equipment and support for working with different media. And they have a lab connected to the Idiomas Sem Fronteiras program.
Oh, the Languages Without Borders program. I've heard of that.
Yeah, a national initiative to promote language learning.
And they seem to be actively investing in these resources.
Definitely. The report mentions continuous investment in technology and facilities. They detail specific upgrades funded by PIPGLA and through leftover funds from international conferences.
Interesting.
They also highlight access to tons of bibliographic information through the UFRJ library system and the CAPES portal, so they have the tools and information students need.
And of course, all of this is supported by the expertise of the faculty, right?
Right.
What does the report tell us about the PIPGLA faculty?
They proudly highlight that many of their permanent faculty have postdoctoral degrees and CNPq research productivity grants, which are quite competitive.
Oh, wow.
The report mentions new additions to the faculty and a single departure. But importantly, the faculty come from diverse backgrounds: modern languages, linguistics, discourse analysis, literature, even anthropology and education.
That's quite a mix.
Yeah, a real strength of the program. And they're not just focused on graduate research.
Right.
They also teach undergrad courses and supervise undergrad research, so they're really involved in the broader university.
That's good to see. And they're also keeping up with their own professional development.
Absolutely. The report gives examples of faculty doing postdoctoral research at universities worldwide, places like San Francisco State, PUC Rio, King's College London, Vienna, even Egypt and Colombia.
Impressive.
Yeah, it shows a real commitment to learning and bringing in new ideas.
We touched on it earlier, but let's dive a little deeper into how they share their research with the public and what their societal impact looks like.
They really want to make sure their research is accessible.
Mm-hmm.
Besides the co-NTXT blog, they highlight faculty appearances in mainstream media, newspapers, magazines, podcasts, even TV. It shows their engagement with broader social issues.
And there are specific examples of this in the report.
Plenty. An interview with Professor Lopes, Professor Tanzi Neto giving courses to education secretaries, Professor Silva collaborating at Berkeley, Professor Gago's partnership with the Court of Justice, and Professor Borbo working on political discourse dictionaries with Sexuality Policy Watch. Quite a range.
It seems like they're very intentional about making sure their research has real-world impact.
Definitely.
The report also talks about their planning and self-assessment. What can you tell us about how they look towards the future and evaluate their own performance?
They have a structured strategic planning process that includes everyone: faculty, students, alumni, and staff. They use the balanced scorecard to align their goals and track progress. A pretty systematic approach.
Interesting. So what are some of their key goals?
The report highlights a few. strengthening academic activities, improving infrastructure, enhancing student training, and promoting intellectual production.
Okay.
They also have initiatives for building community and supporting students, like seminars and workshops. And importantly, they emphasize their commitment to diversity and inclusion.
How so?
They have affirmative action policies for admissions, reserving 30% of places for underrepresented groups: Indigenous, Black, mixed race, transgender, and gender nonconforming individuals. They also prioritize scholarships for economically disadvantaged students.
That's great, making the program more accessible.
Yeah. And for self-assessment, they have a comprehensive process using online questionnaires for everyone, focus groups, and seminars to discuss the findings.
Wow, so a multi-pronged approach.
It helps them get a really well-rounded view.
What were some of the issues that came up in their recent assessment?
They identified a few key areas: encouraging more active participation, dealing with the ongoing challenges of the pandemic, addressing students' financial difficulties, and improving graduation rates.
Sounds like familiar challenges for a lot of institutions.
Mm-hmm.
But they have plans to tackle these, right?
They do. The report outlines their actions and strategies.
Ah.
More extracurricular activities, better communication, exploring online and hybrid formats, supporting student mental health, reinforcing faculty commitment to graduation timelines, and promoting knowledge circulation in various ways.
Okay, so it seems like they're actively working to improve.
They are.
Now, back to the core academic work. The report talks about the quality of the dissertations and theses. Are they aligned with their interaction and discourse focus?
Very much so. The report states that student research is strongly aligned with this central theme. They even provide examples of research topics across the 3 lines from 2021 to 2024.
Can you give us a glimpse into those topics?
Sure. In discourse and literacies, topics included academic literacies, digital activism, multiliteracies, teaching methodologies, fan fiction, literature and education, and even rap as a linguistic expression.
It's amazing how many different directions research can go.
Yeah, it's quite broad.
What about discourse and social practices?
Research there covered linguistic ideologies, education and teacher training, narratives in media, discourse in legal settings, violence against women, and language and identity in communities. A very socially engaged set of topics.
Wow, very relevant. And finally, discourse and transculturality.
Topics in that line included translation studies, language and identity across cultures, linguistic landscapes, and historical discourse analysis. So a real focus on language in different cultural and historical contexts.
It's clear the students are engaged in a lot of important research. What kind of support and training does PIPGLA offer to help them develop?
They have several key initiatives. They run regular thesis and dissertation seminars, methodology workshops specifically focused on applied linguistics, data analysis meetings for feedback, and even a seminar for alumni follow-up.
Oh, the alumni involvement sounds really valuable.
It is. They specifically redesigned the thesis and dissertation seminars to include alumni who can share their experience and advice. The methodology workshops also bring in guest speakers on a wide range of methods.
What kind of methods are we talking about?
Oh, lots of things. They mentioned using software like Elon, corpus linguistics, ethnography, studying linguistic landscapes, exploring methodologies of the oppressed, even biographization, and digital ethnography.
Sounds like a pretty comprehensive toolkit for students.
Definitely. They really believe these activities have improved the quality of student research and helped with timely completion.
That's good to hear. And what about their policies on academic production?
They strongly encourage students to publish their work. They support student participation in conferences, both national and international, and have even secured funding from FAPRJ and CAPES to help with costs.
That's really helpful for students.
Absolutely.
And what about the thesis defense process?
It's rigorous. They emphasize the interdisciplinary makeup of the defense panels with experts from different areas and external evaluators to ensure a well-rounded assessment.
So they take it seriously. What kind of events do PIPGLA students participate in?
Oh, all sorts. They have their own internal seminars, but they also present at major international congresses like ALA and ISCAR. They attend events on translation, language teaching, social issues like race and gender, even education in related fields like discourse studies and legal research.
Wow, they really cover a lot of ground.
They do. It shows their wide range of interests.
And all of this research and training leads to publications, which the report seems very proud of.
As they should be. They highlight the significant number of student publications, especially in top-ranked journals. They're also seeing more co-authorship between faculty and students.
Oh, that's great for collaboration and mentorship.
Definitely. They even give specific examples of impactful publications covering things like decolonial curricula, online mediation, human rights, teaching materials, even queer theory in education.
That's quite a range. And it's not just journal articles, right?
No, they also mention students acting as reviewers for prestigious journals and authoring books and chapters on diverse topics, from language and social media to teaching methodologies, political discourse, and social norms. They even highlight some alumni publications showcasing their lasting impact.
That's really cool. Speaking of alumni, what kind of impact are graduates having after they leave PIPGLA?
The alumni feedback is overwhelmingly positive. They highlight the strong academic foundation, interdisciplinary perspective, research opportunities, and impact on their teaching. The report lists many institutions where they work, showing their influence in academia and beyond.
So the program is successfully preparing them for their careers.
It seems so, but the alumni also had some suggestions for improvement.
Like what?
They mentioned reducing bureaucracy, increasing financial support, and investing more in internationalization. The report mentions that their alumni follow-up committee is looking into these suggestions.
That's good to hear. They're taking feedback seriously. Let's shift focus to the faculty research.
Okay.
What does the report highlight about their contributions?
They really emphasize the quality and diversity of their research. They give an overview of each faculty member and their specific research areas, which cover a really wide range of topics within applied linguistics, from multilingualism to discourse analysis, sociolinguistics, gender and language, translation studies, and even literature and cultural studies.
So a really diverse and accomplished group of scholars.
Very much so. They also highlight their collaborative work through co-authored publications and edited volumes on various topics like queer linguistics, literature and education, race and intersectionality, even the terminology of clothing.
Interesting mix.
Yeah, and their international engagement is really impressive. They mention faculty mobility, collaborations, participation in examining boards, and presentations at conferences all over the world.
Wow, so they're really active in the global academic community.
They are, and this leads to the international circulation of their research through publications in high-impact journals and collaborations with international researchers.
So their work is making a real impact beyond Brazil.
Definitely.
But they're also very involved in teaching and mentoring their students.
Absolutely. They're active in the research clusters, guiding students, teaching the core curriculum, and building those international collaborations. They highlight the importance of that Introduction to Applied Linguistics course and list a whole bunch of partner universities, from Russia and the UK to Egypt, Uruguay, Italy, the US, and even Singapore.
That's a pretty impressive network.
It is. They're also involved in undergrad programs and public education initiatives, and they proudly mention the postdoctoral training their faculty have undertaken at top institutions.
So they're not just focused on their own little corner of the university.
Not at all. They see applied linguistics as a tool for social transformation, and they are committed to using their research to address real-world problems.
You mentioned that earlier.
Yeah, they highlight how their work is tackling important social issues. Research clusters like LAID and ProEra are exploring historical events and social inequalities through discourse analysis.
Mm-hmm.
Professor Montez is doing fascinating work on travel narratives. And they have research on precariousness, political agency, social justice, and decoloniality, even highlighting Professor Silva's concept of language as hope.
I like that.
Yeah, it's a powerful idea. The NUDES cluster is looking at exclusion and social transformation, and they even have research groups like ORI focusing on racism, and SEGEFIS exploring psychoanalysis and feminist theory in literature.
So a real focus on the power of language to address these complex social issues.
Exactly. They emphasize their commitment to social justice and emancipation, and they showcase research on criticality in education, teacher agency, and resistance.
That's great to see.
Yeah, and they don't just stop at research. They have all these community engagement projects.
Oh, cool. Like what?
Professor Fabricio is working with a support group for mothers who have lost children to violence. Professors Lopes and Silva are partnering with communities in the Complexo do Alemão. Professor Borba has the Termos Ambiguous project, and Professor Gago is in dialogue with the School of Magistracy. They even develop innovative teaching materials like the Voices collection.
So they are really walking the walk when it comes to social engagement.
They are, and they're not just doing it quietly. They're also organizing and participating in national and international events to make sure their work is seen and heard.
Great. So societal impact in detail. What else are they doing to make a difference?
The report emphasizes their graduates' high employability in various institutions, but they also give specific examples of alumni projects with real impact.
Okay.
Claudia Meyer-Grassa's work with the Shelter for Children, Valdini Lobo's Pedagogy of the Border project, alumni working to combat LGBT phobia in schools, and projects integrating migrants. They're also actively connecting with undergrad programs and the community through extension courses, workshops, and partnerships with various institutions.
So sharing their knowledge and expertise beyond the graduate program.
Exactly. And their initiatives like CLIC, the Community Language Course, and Lab LA, the Academic Literacies Lab, are providing valuable services to the community.
And those collaborations, they sound impactful.
They are. They highlight the translation of our bodies, ourselves, partnerships with legal institutions, collaborations with Colegio Pedro II, the Zeitgeist Group, the Termos Ambigos Project on Political Discourse, and collaborations with another federal institute. They're also deeply involved in basic education through research, teacher training, and even developing materials for schools.
They really are reaching all levels of the education system.
They are. And for dissemination, they've got it all. A modern website, YouTube, Instagram, dedicated pages for research clusters, the CoInTXT blog, podcasts, even coordinating the website for the Brazilian Applied Linguistics Association. And they don't shy away from mainstream media, appearing in Folha de São Paulo, O Globo, the New York Times, and various interviews.
That's a comprehensive approach to making sure their work gets out there.
They're definitely doing a great job of it.
Let's dive into internationalization a bit more. We touched on faculty research abroad, but what other forms of cooperation are they involved in?
They have tons of international collaborations. Professor Borba is working with King's College London. Professor Wells was at the University of Vienna.
Okay.
Professor Nascimento did her postdoc in Egypt. Professor Vargas was in Colombia.
Okay, so all over the world.
They have joint research projects, including one on sociolinguistics with researchers from the UK.
Okay.
They also have a collaboration with the University of Liverpool on multilingual heritage, a long-standing partnership with the University of Aswan in Egypt, and a partnership with the Institute of Linguistics at UDLR in Uruguay.
Wow, that's impressive.
Professor Sundy coordinates an international research network on literacies. Professor Vaz Ferreira collaborates with the University of Turin. Professor Borba organized a seminar in Paris on gender-neutral language.
Oh, interesting.
And there are other partnerships with Colombian and Italian universities and a CNPq-funded network on Black educators in Latin America. Some faculty have also held visiting scholar positions in Singapore and Germany.
So their network is truly global.
And their research is published in top international journals, and they're involved in editorial roles and peer review for journals and funding agencies.
Really impressive reach.
Definitely.
Now, let's step back and look at the history of applied linguistics at UFRJ and how PIPGLA evolved.
Okay.
What were the key milestones?
Applied Linguistics at UFRJ started in the 1970s as part of the Modern Languages program.
Okay.
In 1992, CAPES suggested turning the Applied Linguistics to English teaching line into a separate program with 3 research lines.
Okay.
Initially, there was an imbalance in productivity between the lines.
Interesting.
Over time, they restructured the lines, incorporating insights from other fields like anthropology. In 2009, they started the doctoral program, and in 2015, they reformed again, creating the 3 current lines we see today: discourse and literacies, discourse and social practices, and discourse and transculturality.
And how did those changes go?
Really well. They got a higher score from CAPES after the 2015 reforms, and they added faculty in 2018 to maintain balance. The report really emphasizes how dynamic and interdisciplinary the program is today.
That's great to see. And finally, what about admissions and the impact of COVID?
In 2024, the master's program had 39 places, 31 applicants, and 10 approved. The doctoral program had 29 places, 21 applicants, and 11 approved. For COVID, UFRJ issued guidelines for the transition back to in-person activities. The report acknowledges the negative impacts on students and faculty, the challenges to research, and the delays in graduation.
So this deep dive into PIPGLA has given us a really good understanding of this program.
It's a fascinating program, really at the forefront of applied linguistics.
You now have a much clearer picture of what they do, the impact they have, and their plans for the future.
Yeah.
But it also raises questions, doesn't it? What can other programs learn from them? How can applied linguistics research help us solve societal problems? And what are the ethical considerations of this kind of research?
Those are all great questions to consider. This report really highlights the power of language, not just to describe the world, but to shape it.
That's a powerful takeaway.
Yeah,
And it makes you think about the role language plays in your own life and the issues you care about.
it does.
Well, thank you so much for sharing this report with us. It's been a truly fascinating deep dive.
My pleasure. It was a great discussion.